Leaving just enough open to interpretation can make a movie immortal, ensuring that fans will be left debating the meaning of their favorites for years to come. In that vein, we've assembled an assortment of movies that have left audiences puzzled. Here are a few of the most confusing plot twists explained.
I missed out on the whole thing, to be honest with you. I was confused by it. I was very confused by the whole thing, if I'm being honest.
Who's who in Lost Highway? In 1997's Lost Highway, we meet Fred Madison, a jazz musician accused of murdering his wife, Renee. Fred goes to jail, but the next morning, the guards discover that Fred's place has been taken by Pete Dayton, a car mechanic with mild amnesia. Pete is soon entangled with Alice Wakefield, a woman who looks identical to the murdered Renee. The movie continually questions who's who, all while a mysterious man follows them both, videotaping the confusing carnage that ensues. The obsessive display of infidelity, characters watching and being watched, and grisly murders might all seem familiar to anyone who watched the O.J. Simpson trial in 1995. Nearly 10 years after Lost Highway's release, director David Lynch would elaborate on the connection between the movie and the Simpson trial in his book, Catching the Big Fish. Lynch wrote, "I wondered how, if a person did these deeds, he could go on living, and we found this great psychology term, psychogenic fugue, describing an event where the mind tricks itself to escape some horror. Fred Madison is a man who murdered his wife and invented an entire alternate life story to escape his own guilt. It's fitting then that the movie ends with a high-speed car chase in which Fred feels out of control. At least it wasn't on the 405 highway like OJ." Vertigo's lookalikes. 40 years before David Lynch confounded audiences with Lost Highway's pair of lookalike characters played by the same actress, Alfred Hitchcock pulled a similar trick in Vertigo. The film introduces us to Scotty, a private investigator who has retired from police work due to his struggles with, well, vertigo. His old friend Gavin hires Scotty to trail his wife, Madeline, because he fears she's possessed by the spirit of her great-grandmother. Madeline is drawn to the mission where her great-grandmother died and rushes up the bell tower. Scotty's vertigo prevents him from following, and he watches in horror as she falls to her death. He's so shaken that he's committed to an institution. Upon release, he meets a woman named Judy who looks eerily like Madeline. The two begin an unhealthy relationship as Scotty remakes Judy to look like Madeline.
"You're looking for the suit that she wore for me. You want me to be dressed like her."
"Judy, I just want you to look nice."
A flashback reveals the twist, that the Madeline Scotty knew was always Judy, who Gavin hired in an elaborate plot to get rid of his wife. All of the supernatural elements of the story were concocted to confuse Scotty, whose vertigo was guaranteed to leave him a helpless witness to the fake fatality. Parental revelations. After Rey was introduced in The Force Awakens with vague questions about the identity of her long-lost parents, The Last Jedi had her confront the truth. In a shocking twist for viewers that were expecting some variation of Luke Skywalker's own twisted family tree, it turns out that her parents were nobody important. While some saw this twist as a cop-out, director Rian Johnson had his reasons. Thematic parallels are an essential part of the Star Wars formula, as George Lucas likes to say.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
On an episode of Empire's Film Podcast, Johnson explained that he didn't just write that moment to contrast the famous scene in Empire Strikes Back. It's actually the most dramatic and difficult thing for Rey to reckon with. Instead of being given a tailored role in the story like so many heroes before her, she gets told that her place isn't where she's been looking for it.
Hardest thing to hear is, nope, this is not going to define you. In fact, Kylo is going to use this to try and undercut your confidence so that you'll feel you have to lean on him for your identity.
It's now in her hands to find her own identity. It's purposeful, and it's an intentional change in the familiar patterns found in all previous Star Wars films. Psycho Killer. American Psycho is designed to leave audiences wondering how much of what they've seen is actually real. As the film reaches its climax in an over-the-top killing spree riddled with explosions and swooping police helicopters, it becomes clear that Patrick Bateman may not be an entirely reliable narrator. The morning after the climactic chaos, Bateman returns to the apartment where he'd been executing people for weeks, ready to clean up the evidence of his misdeeds. He's disturbed to find the place empty and freshly painted.
You saw the ad in the Times?
No. Yeah. In the Times.
There was no ad in the Times.
What does this scene represent for the plot? According to screenwriter Guinevere Turner, he did do all this stuff and he still cannot stand out. He's stuck. Because Bateman's crimes are so unremarkable in the film's viciously heightened universe of Wall Street capitalism that all attention, even punishment, will elude him forever.
Don't you know who I am? I'm not Davis. I'm Patrick Bateman.
Twisted timelines. As the Fast and Furious franchise has branched out into ambitious new plot threads, it's quickly revealed itself as a labyrinth of non-linear narrative that must be explored, in the words of the immortal Dominic Toretto.
Quarter mile at a time.
In the series' third film, 2006's Tokyo Drift, newcomer Sean Boswell is taken under the wing of Han, a racer who teaches him the power of drifting. Unfortunately, Han is tragically killed during a race, prompting Toretto to appear and declare himself an old friend of Han's in the final scene. Now here's where the twist comes in. 2009 saw the release of the series' fourth film, Fast and Furious, which reunited the original cast and Han. Han says he's off to Tokyo, leading the audience to believe that the fourth film takes place concurrently with the third. But no, Han's back again in a more significant role in Fast 5 and sticks around through Fast and Furious 6. The story finally catches up to Han's death in a post-credit scene at the end of the sixth movie, which reveals that Deckard Shaw, the villain of Furious 7, was actually responsible for the accident in Tokyo Drift. So the series chronology means that Tokyo Drift actually happens in between the sixth and seventh movie. Although don't expect the series to get any simpler just because the timeline finally matches up. Series writer Chris Morgan has recently speculated that Han could come back yet again. And why not? After all, Han is family and...
You don't turn your back on family.
Just a dream, right? Despite the popularity of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, director Wes Craven never envisioned the series living beyond one film. Executive producer Robert Shea disagreed, hoping to leave the door open for a follow-up, and the compromise they reached resulted in a fairly baffling finale for the original movie. Even though Nancy vanquished Freddy earlier in the film, the ending scene seems to imply his return when she's trapped in a convertible bearing Krueger's trademark red and green stripes. What does it all mean? When Nancy reappears in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3: Dream Warriors, she mentions that Krueger got rid of her friends and her mother. We can assume then that Nancy undoing the murders in her defeat of Krueger was a dream in itself. In the documentary Never Sleep Again, Robert Englund, the actor who plays Freddy Krueger, proposes his own theory that the film is a precognitive nightmare.
Everything in it will happen, but it hasn't really happened. She's just dreamt that it's going to happen, and she's trying to warn everybody, and then it begins at the very ending.